everybody, Wayne here. In today's overview and review, I'm going to take a look at the deluxe edition of Cruel Necessity, the English Civil Wars, 1640 to 1653, designed by John Welch, and this deluxe edition is published by Worthington. Worthington did provide this review copy for me to show off to you guys. Okay, Cruel Necessity is a solitaire wargame that uses the states of siege system to simulate the military, political, and religious struggles of the English Civil Wars. I'm going to do a quick overview. I have a full playthrough for you guys to check out to really see the game in action. Do my pros and cons, and as always, we'll have my final thoughts. Okay, let's get down to the table. All right, let's do an overview here of Cruel Necessity. Again, I do have a full playthrough of the game if you want to see it in more detail. Okay, so we have the map set up here. Obviously, English Civil Wars, right, 17th century. The game, like all states of siege games, is going to be divided into tracks. Now, the tracks don't have a line. Instead, they're going to be numbered, and they're colored, so I can tell them apart. So you have England here divided into two separate colors. You have West, the yellow here, the West Army, and the Royalist Army. You have the North, which is the red. You can see they're colored here. And then see numbers 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, ending in London over here. You have the Scottish blue, and then Ireland in green here. So what you're doing, like all states of siege games, you're flipping over a card, you're resolving the card generally in order. In this case, it's going to be left to right in each area, and then top to bottom. And I'll cover the cards in a second here. I was going to do a quick total overview. So you're resolving the cards. It's going to have things that are military events, religious events, and political events. You're going to have the armies activate and move towards the lower number. Again, very common in states of siege, right? You also have this track over here, this religious and political track. That has your relations with different factions, different entities, right, that existed back then. Whether it's Ireland and Scotland, whether it's with Parliament, Puritanism, Catholicism, or monarchy. Those tracks, you can see there's letters next to them, A, B, C, D, E, or not E, excuse me, A, B, C, D, F. You're going to want to make sure you keep them above the F at the very least. Because at the end of any turn, the two ways to lose are London is no longer under your control, so it gets besieged, which you have these dials that as it's besieged, the number lowers, and then finally it flips over from parliamentary controlled to royalist controlled. If you don't control London at the end of your turn, or if you have 4 different factions in F, you're going to lose the game automatically. Okay, let's look at the cards. So, cards, again, like all states of siege games, are going to tell you what to do. Now, they're going to have a title on it, right? So, Parliament offers King propositions of Uxbridge. Then it's going to tell, and that's the card number, which you can play numerically, right? Or you can play them randomly. It's going to give you the date, the year. It's going to tell you, a little bit of history, right? A little bit of history on the card here. Then you're going to read it down, left to right, and then down from each section. Again, remember, military events, religious events, political events. Very simple to read. Here you have, the little guy is in, little infantry icon is in black, so there's not going to be any tactical battle. We'll cover that in a second. You have Scotland, so Scotland's going to activate. So Scotland will go ahead and move down the track. If Scotland is disordered, it would flip over to its ordered side. If it is at one of your fortresses that you control, it would then besiege it. West would activate 2 times on this card. Then you go to siege or fortify Edinburgh. So Edinburgh right now is royalist controlled, so it would just go ahead and fortify, so it would increase in strength. If it was controlled by me, there would be an automatic siege roll, which is technically 2 rolls when the AI does it, when the system does it. Then you're done with the military actions for this card. You go down, you have the religious action. So it tells you a little bit what's going on. In this case, you can, or event, excuse me, religious event. You may either cancel Christmas for Puritanism to go up, Parliament to go down. Remember, on the track here, right? So Puritanism would go up 1, Parliament would go down 1. Or you may keep Christmas, Puritanism goes down 1, but you get +1 zeal point. What are zeal points? Zeal points are kept track down here. They are what your currency is. These are what you spend. These points are what you spend to take all of your actions during your action turn. So during the action phase. All right. And finally, you'll have religious events. And it'll just be something, basically, usually it just happens, good or bad, right? In this case, monarchy goes down 1, not good for you. You want to keep all these tracks as high as you can over here. So, In addition to that, you're going to have events like, okay, here's a good one. This one here. So the Battle of Marston Moor. So just tell you there's going to be a battle. Again, it's going to explain when it was, what happened. And it's going to give you, the red icon instead of the black icon. What does that mean? You're now going to have a tactical battle. So as soon as you see that, and in this case, it does say you get these 2 cavalry Ironsides and Cromwell received prior to the battle. Okay, so you throw those over there. Then you're going to go ahead and go down to the tactical board. In the old edition, I believe it was a separate board. Here, it's part of the regular board. You can see it over there. Very, very simple. You're going to pick an army, a royalist army, the north or the west. You're going to pick one of them as like the one that you're targeting. Then you can grab any named units you have, you can place them on the board automatically. Then you just start drawing. You draw randomly from the cups or on the board upside down or from a bag or draw a bag, whatever you want to do it. You draw them randomly. It says place them face down and flip them up. Since you're drawing randomly, it doesn't matter. You can just place them up as you go. But go ahead, just place them all, place everything, and you go ahead and what you want to do is check all the units that are out there. Because some of the units are going to have an event on there, and it's going to say, oh, event. What you're going to do for each one that has an event, you're going to draw from the battle events cards. You're going to read the event. It's going to be either something good or something bad. Something's going to happen immediately. Usually it's bad. Something that's a card that you can retain, like this one I have over here, you can go ahead and use in the future. After that happens, you can decide if you want to spend some zeal to increase the strength of one of your units. So zeal, again, is the currency right, +1 strength. Possibly can help you out there. Then you're going to start rolling. You're going to roll for each area, so you can see first, third, fourth, second. You're going to go ahead and roll. You're going to roll 1d6 and combine the value of the units. Because you can see, right, units have like a 4 on there, a 3, etc. And it's the musket and pike, and then cavalry on the flanks, by the way. You're going to add up the values with the dice, compare them. You're either going to have a draw, be victory, or defeat. For each section, if it's victory, you move your units to the victory. If it's draw, you move them to draw. If it's defeat, you move them to defeat. If there's named units and they're defeated on the royalist side, you're going to go ahead and move them to the defeat as well. At the end of the combat, the end of the battle, you're going to check to see which has a majority. And that area basically wins, right? Is it a victory? Is it a draw? Is it a defeat? Or if it's a tie, it's going to be a draw. You enact what happens here. You either disorder the enemy army, or there's no effect. You lose a zeal and the monarchy goes down, or you lose a zeal for a draw. Any special units that were in defeat, the named ones, you're going to roll on a chart. It may end up being the recovery, maybe discarded entirely, or it may go right back to the draw pool. And then there's possible benefit points if you have like a resounding victory, decisive victory, and you have a ton of units in the victory box. You have BPs you get to spend right away, extra zeal, increase a unit on the political track, or to put a negative strength marker on one of the armies here. So. All right, after the tactical battle, you go right back to the card. So, say we conducted our tactical battle. We finished up all that. Boom, we go right to North activates twice. Again, maybe we had picked North as our army and we had won. It would have been disordered, so the first activation would flip it from disordered to its ordered side. Second one, it would then advance or besiege, etc. Religious event, Puritanism +1 DRM. So you have all these DRM markers, strength markers. You just go ahead and place it on the Puritanism tile. And that way, if you wanted to conduct a political action, you could go ahead and when you roll, you're going to get a +1 on your die roll modifier. Or +1 on your die, I guess. And then the religious event on this card, Ireland goes down and Catholicism goes down. So not a good one for you right there. Okay. In addition to, flipping the cards, you have the tracks going on. As you're flipping through the deck, you're going to have achievement cards that'll pop up. And those are up in the top left there. Those are going to be things that you can purchase. Now, what will happen is you have to fulfill the requirements. So you have to have, say, Parliament over there, right? Puritanism over there, equal or add a B. So that's where those letters can really help you, making sure that you have them higher up. If you have that, and for this card, self-denying ordinance, you battle this turn or last turn was a victory. So say we'd won that, right? And then we have our Parliament and Puritanism, say they were at B's. Oh, we can spend 2 zeal. We can buy this card. What does it do? Check the bottom. Permanently remove both 1 strength parliamentary musket and pike units from play, and you gain the equivalent of 3 victory points. So you'd set this aside in a deck. Now, you can say, well, why would I want to remove units? Remember, it's random draw. So if you remove those 1 strength units, when you're drawing from your cup, you're going to have a greater chance to draw your stronger units, which is just going to increase your chances you're going to, be stronger for the tactical battle board. In addition, like I said, it keeps track of the victory points for you, those 3 extra, which if you notice all the red down arrows and then the blue up arrows throughout on the tracks, around the board, all over the place, those are going to affect your victory points. So combined with these, you definitely, and they can sometimes have a pretty powerful effect on the game. Okay, so you're drawing a card, right? Running down sequence play here. It's event phase. You draw a card, you run through it. Okay, I'm going to tell you what to do, what exactly is going to happen. You're done with it. Place it on the discard pile. Now it's the action phase. That's where you're spending your zeal that you've earned. How do you earn zeal? Well, I'll get to that at the end during the housekeeping phase. But you're spending the zeal you have to campaign against the enemy armies. You are giving zeal, spending it to infuse a single unit or a marker with a +1 DRM. Purchase, remember, those achievement cards. You can besiege an enemy fortress or a revolt marker. You can fortify a friendly fortress, increasing its strength by rotating the dial. You can engage in politics, which influences the tracks over here. At the end of all that, you've spent your zeal, or maybe save a couple because you're like, I just want to make sure to have a couple for next turn. Okay, now what do you do during the housekeeping phase? All those temporary strength modifiers, markers, they get put back in the pool. You gain zeal points. You gain zeal points. They're on the board. It's very easy to remember. 3 zeal here, 1 here, 1 here, 1 here. And then if you have Catholicism up at the top there in an A, you get +1 from that as well. Those zeal are going to give you all your actions. So I'm emphasizing this, and very important that you keep your zeal up. You need to maintain control of these fortresses, and you probably should try to get Catholicism up as well, at least as long as you can. And eventually it's going to start having a lot of negatives as you get through the deck, so it's just going to be really hard to keep up at the max. Get those zeal, which is, like I said, your currency to spend. So when you lose your fortresses, when, so the enemy, they're marching the west here, Royalist West Army. They crush Bristol, and they flip it over. Oh no, it's now Royalist controlled. Oh no, guess what? When it's the housekeeping phase, I don't get that 1 zeal. Now I'm down. Now I only get 3, 4, 5, 6 instead of the 7 or whatever I would have had before. Oh, I lose Catholicism. Oh, that drops to 5. You get the idea, right? As time goes by, if you're doing poorly, you're going to have less zeal to spend. So you need to maintain your core strength here in England. You don't get zeal directly from, Dublin and Edinburgh, but obviously there are negatives if you let the Irish or Scottish army run rampant. There's going to hurt you in other ways as well. So at the end of it, so while you're playing, the end of each turn, so you do technically before the housekeeping phase, but basically I'm going to tell you how you lose the game, how you win or how you lose, right? Win, you make it through all the decks, the first Civil War deck, the second Civil War deck, and the third Civil War deck. So, first English Civil War, this is the deck for it. Second English Civil War right here, there's a deck for it. And then there's a third one over there, gold deck. Make it all the way through. You check, see where your victory points are at, and see what happens there. Now, in the extremely more likely chance that you don't make it through the deck, you're going to check, while you're going, each turn, you're checking for 2 things. One is London controlled by you, which I mentioned earlier, right? So has it fallen to the Royalists? If at the very end of the turn, which remember, the system goes and then you get to go. So you have a chance to gain it back if they take it over. If that happens and you don't gain it back, you lose. Royalists take over, you're beheaded, and bad news for Parliament. Democracy is hurt by that. Or 4 of the 6 political markers here are down in the F boxes. Same thing. The end of the turn, you have four of them or more in the F box. You lose that way. Okay, I think that's it for an overview. Again, I have there's more to the game for sure. Obviously, I didn't explain tactical combat super in depth. And then there's different actions you can take, different little things. You see these clubmen deviltry markers that pop up on the board. Obviously, there's more to the game, but I think this is a good overview. Again, I have the playthrough if you want to see the game in depth. Otherwise, I think that's it. Let's go to my pros and cons. All right, pros and cons. As usual, cons first. First con I have is the player aid. It could be better. It's not a bad player aid by any means. I have seen far worse. But I do feel like there could be some additional detail on it. With solitaire games, I always say, You should, learn the game with the rulebook, but be able to play the game from the board and the player aids. You're probably going to be checking the rulebook more frequently than necessary, not from, rule difficulty or complexity, just because of the lack of detail on the player aid. There's just some things where it'll describe something, a sequence of play, but there's a little bit missing, right? Where, especially your first couple playthroughs, but even later on, you're probably going to go, what was that again? And now it does have rule references, right? It'll say, okay, check 6.2.2, but, it could be a little bit more in detail, but maybe that's an extra player aid card that just gives you a little bit more to go on, so you're not constantly checking the rulebook. The second con I have for the game, and really the biggest one, is the difficulty. This game is hard, very hard, even frustratingly so. The game just doesn't fight fair, and you doing well relies a little bit too much on luck. Examples where things just don't feel fair. If the result of a tactical battle is a draw, as you can see over here, you lose 1 zeal. Why are you punished for a draw? The only way to come out ahead during a tactical battle is to earn a victory, which, as you are placing units randomly, with the exception of your named units, which you can place, where you want, and then you're resolving combat from those mostly randomly placed units by dice rolls, which is random. It's all feels very random. Then on the map board, the Royalists besiege one of your forts. They get to roll consecutive d6s. So not 2d6 and then apply the best. They get to roll a d6 and they get to roll another d6. So they get 2 attempts to reduce your fortress strength. When you besiege one of their forts, you only get to roll a single d6. A secondary issue is how the game actually punishes you more the worse you are playing, putting you into kind of a death spiral. You know how some games have a catch-up mechanic, to kind of make things more fair? In Cruel Necessity, it's the opposite. Once you begin doing poorly, you're cooked. Some examples of what I mean by that. When forts, such as Oxford and Hull, are, fall to the Royalists, you lose their +1 zeal per turn income. Remember, as I explained, zeal is your currency that you use. You spend it to take any sort of action in the game. The less zeal you have, the less you can do. So now you need to take back those forts, but you have even less zeal than you did before to do it with. Yes, there's a delay, right? So they take a fort, you still have your zeal from the previous turn, so you technically can try to take it back right away, but it just shows you that you're already on your back foot. And if you don't take it back successfully, maybe have another fire you got to put out, guess what? That next turn, or at the end of the turn, you're getting 1 less zeal. Now let's take a look at the cards in the game. When you wrap up the first Civil War, I had the card right here. Where did that go? Well, okay, here it is. It's actually this one here. So, when you wrap up the first Civil War and you start using these silver-bordered second Civil War cards, you first conduct a victory check. So you check your current VP score, and it tells you whether you receive something good or suffer a penalty. And you know what? You guessed it. If you're doing poorly, you're actually punished. So not only are you already doing poorly, but the game hurts you even more. Whereas if you somehow made it this far and you're doing well, you're rewarded for it. You can see on here the victory check, just what I'm talking about. So you check your current VP. If it's 8 or higher, you gain monarchy goes up, you get an additional zeal point. If it's +7 to +3, you gain 2 zeal points. Wonderful, right? Well, what if you're only doing +2 to -6? Oh, they siege or fortify Oxford. Or if you're doing really poorly, -7 or fewer, a deviltry marker goes on the game board. The game doesn't let up when it knocks you down. It kicks you and makes sure you stay down. Now, being difficult to win and solitaire wargames usually kind of goes hand in hand, right? As this can increase the replayability of a game, increase a sense of challenge and of tension. But with Cruel Necessity, it can sometimes be cruel indeed. Okay, that's it for the cons. On to the pros. First thing, the production value is through the roof. This is a given with Worthington at this point, but I believe it's worth mentioning every time. As honestly, few wargames or wargame publishers reach this level of quality. I would say more every year, but definitely not all of them yet. We're not there yet. The mounted board, the linen finished cards, the thick individually die-cut pieces. The art and graphic design also matches the gameplay and theme perfectly. There's one small typo on the board here where the F, the marker, so they'll see this line here is supposed to differentiate between the D and the F, saying, hey, if they're below this marker, they're in F, they're in dangerous territory. Here it's printed above the D. It should be printed below the D right here. So it's just off by 1 square. But that doesn't affect the gameplay at all. And overall, the game is simply beautiful on the table. Secondly, I love how all the choices you can make on any given turn. You do have to spend time and actions on the military, right? Keep pushing the armies back away from your zeal-generating forts and London. You also can't forget to keep an eye on the political and religious tracks, as if enough of them fall to F, you lose. But once you've sort of done that minimum in each area, right, kind of pushing back the threats just enough, there's kind of a balance in the middle where you get to decide what you want to focus on. Do you want to push those tracks up, give you the opportunity to buy achievement cards and increasing the VPs on the track? Or do you want to spend all of your resources fighting the armies directly, pushing them all the way back on their tracks, building up your forts, earning you more zeal, but maybe not quite as many victory points and no achievement cards? While making these choices, trying to remember it's better to be proactive and stay ahead of the royalists instead of reacting to the damage they've already done to you. Replayability is important for a solitaire game, and this game has it in spades. The randomness, while frustrating at times, also means the game and turns play out very differently. Also, you can either play with the cards in order and follow the historical events, or you can shuffle them, to ramp up the chaos factor. In either case, you'll play again and again and never see the exact same game play out. Finally, I love the history throughout the game. All the cards in the main deck and the battle event deck have quotes and summaries of what happened historically on that date. It not only helps someone like me who knew nothing about the history, but also increases the immersion into the theme of the game. All right, that's it for my pros and cons. Let's end with my final thoughts. Cruel Necessity is one of those games that is easy to learn, easy to play, and I just kept going back to, despite the frustrations I felt at times. One thing I didn't mention in my cons, but I'm a little ambivalent about, is the tactical battles. Their resolution just feels so random, and they slow down the rest of the game. Cruel Necessity, like most States of Siege games, has a great flow, right? As you flip cards, move armies, adjust political tracks, conduct your actions, toss some dice, etc. The same happens with Cruel Necessity, except when you see that red infantry icon on the card, then you have to hit the brakes, you have to go to the tactical part of the board, and you're drawing units randomly, you're rolling dice for them. It just doesn't have a lot of meat to it, right? It doesn't feel like a tactical battle board. It feels kind of like a random board. I honestly got to the point that I didn't even want to see that icon. It makes me think of another game, Agricola, Master of Britain, where the tactical battle was the weakest part of the game. So weak, in fact, that the designer, Emil Holland, eventually took that mechanic entirely out of the series with later games. I do wonder how Cruel Necessity would play without those tactical battles. Ultimately, I did enjoy my time with Cruel Necessity, for many reasons, but especially for the history the game taught me through the cards. I mentioned during my recon video how I knew practically nothing about the English Civil Wars. Well, that has definitely changed thanks to this game, which I think is one of the highest compliments you can give a historical game. I even preferred to play Cruel Necessity with the cards in numerical order, so I could read a running recap of the English Civil Wars through the cards, as opposed to, shuffling them randomly. But that option does exist. Looking at the armies marching across this beautiful board and trying to decide what is the most impactful action I can take in a particular turn, while also trying to think ahead to what the royalists are going to do to me next turn, makes for quite the experience. If you don't mind the crushing difficulty and randomness, or you're maybe willing to finesse the rules to make it a tad easier, then I think there's a lot to love in this deluxe edition box. All right, thank you to everyone for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please let me know what you think of my video and this game in the comments below. And until next time, everybody, later.